The pronouns he and him are mistranslated. And the reason why they're mistranslated is because they do not agree with what the original noun is. So welcome back to the Christian Kabbalah Center. My name is Shimon Klinger. I am so happy you're here. We've finally gotten to the place, my friends, where we can begin to look at the Gospel of John verse by verse. So we're going to be starting right now with what is called the prologue. The first 18 verses of the Gospel of John are different than the rest. Though we are going to take the understanding that these 18 verses, the prologue of the Gospel of John, introduce foundational spiritual concepts, spiritual secrets that are then expounded upon. They are detailed in the rest of the book. Let's get right into it. So in almost any contemporary version or translation of the Gospel of John, John 1 through 3 reads like this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made. And we can see, if we compare translations, if we look at the first 3 verses, in almost all of the versions that are out there, it reads about the same. Now you can see here that in the King James Version, there are a couple of things that are different, but for the most part, the translators agree that this is how it should be. What we're going to do, though, is that we are going to reanalyze the Greek from a perspective that is outside of the church. And when we do that, we're going to find that some of these versions have been mistranslated. And we can get a hint of this if we look at the King James Version. So the King James Version reads for verses 1 through 3. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God." This is different than the other versions here that say he was with God in the beginning. And when we go to the Greek, we can understand why the King James Version translated verse 2 as "the same was with God in the beginning" instead of "he was with God in the beginning." So if we go to this really convenient tool at BibleHub.com, it lists out the Greek and the translation. It also lists out the concordance and gives us so much information of how to look and analyze the biblical Greek. So you can see here, this is John 1, and if we click ahead to John 1, 2, we can see that this word here, hutros, is translated to he. In many of the contemporary translations, that is with a capital he to make sure that we as readers know that it's talking about Jesus, supposedly. So it says, you can see here, he was in the beginning with God, and that is the translation, the English translation from the Greek, and the Greek is right here. Okay? If we go to John 1:3, John 1:3 says, "All things through him came into being. Without him, not even one thing came into being that has come into being." So these are the direct translations of these Greek words here. And the 2 words that we really need to hone in when we look at these verses are hutros, which is a pronoun that translates to he. This is in verse 1, 2. And then secondarily, this verse here, auto, which translates to him. It repeats right here, auto here, okay? And again, these are pronouns, and in the contemporary versions of the gospel text, these pronouns are translated to him as a reference to Jesus. So if we click on the concordance, we can get a cross-section of any time this word here, hutros, was used in the Greek. And without even really looking too deeply in it, we can begin to see that there might be an issue with the translation. You see in Matthew 3:3, hutros, the Greek was used. However, this was translated as this. It was not translated as he, as it is translated in John 1:2. And if we look, just a quick look all the way down, we scroll down, 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 maybe in one or two places the word hutros translates to he, but for the very most part it means this. And if we go to the other one in John 1:3, the other word, which in Greek is auto, and we click on, we do the same thing, we find the same thing, that for the very most part, it doesn't translate to him or he. We see her here, and we're going to explain why that is right now. When we translate the pronoun is always referring back to the original noun that was originally used. And this is an important concept. Again, because in Greek, even though the nouns themselves are assigned either a masculine or feminine gender, those nouns, when we translate it, are only translated to he or she pronouns when they are directly referring to a person, right? So if utros is referring to a person, then we take on the pronoun of he or she. But if the pronoun utros is referring only to an object, we use the pronoun it. So let's look at an example to make this a little bit clearer. We're going to use an example of this particular sentence, which is, Caleb arrived today. He is in the living room. And this is very similar, as we're going to find, to the sentence structure of John 1:1 through 1:2. So again, the sentence structure says, Caleb arrived today. He is in the living room. Now, obviously, if we look at this, the pronoun he is referring to Caleb. Caleb arrived today. He is in the living room. But if we change this, and instead of having Caleb arriving today, we say the television is arriving today, it changes the pronoun, right? So if we say the television arrived today, it is in the living room, it here refers back to the television. We do not say in any way, shape, or form, we do not say the television arrived today, he is in the living room, right? When he is the pronoun talking about the television. No, we say the television arrived today, it is in the living room, or we say Caleb arrived today, he is in the living room. We don't change the pronoun. The pronoun agrees with the original noun that we're talking about. We do not say the television arrived today, he is in the living room. And the reason why we do not say that is because he does not agree with the television. So why is all of this important? And the simple reason is because this concept plays into the translation for the first 3 verses of John. Again, as they have been translated throughout the generations, it reads this: In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. However, the pronouns he and him are mistranslated. And the reason why they're mistranslated is because they do not agree with what the original noun is. And that original noun is logos. And we know logos to mean word. But logos is not a person. Logos is a thing. Now, the text is not very clear about what logos is, and we will address that in the next video. We're simply talking here about the actual Greek and the translation. So if we're going to be using proper grammar when looking at these 3 verses, because logos is not a person, that logos is a thing, we need to make sure that the pronouns agree with the original noun. And if we do that, utros and auto should be translated as it, because again, logos, or the word, is not a person, it is a thing. So if we reread the first 3 verses with this in mind, it should be read as this: In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It was in the beginning with God. Through it, all things were made, and without it, not one thing was made that has been made. The reason why the translators translated these two Greek words as he is because later on we are told that the word became flesh. This is in verse number 14. And as a result of this, they have assumed that Jesus was the word, and therefore they substituted in the word he as a direct reference to Jesus. But as we will find out in later videos, this is not the best way to make the translation, especially because, as we will find out in the next video, the term logos does not necessarily refer to a person. In fact, if we look at it from a Kabbalistic perspective, logos is not a person. So this concludes this first video. In the next video, we will be talking about the ramifications of this simple mistranslation, and especially from the perspective of Kabbalah, while this little mistranslation has prevented us from understanding the true meaning of this verse. So thank you guys all for watching. I love you all. Have an amazing day. Stay tuned for the next video. See you guys then.